Hi guys, so let's talk about all the books that I read between September and October. I have been so bad at doing these wrap-ups. I think the last one I did was in July, so definitely been very bad, but hopefully this is going to be the start of me getting back into the swing of things. And I read some really great books in September, and I may have only read 4 in October, so I wanted to combine the two, and then hopefully I'll be back to doing them monthly from now on. But we'll see how that goes. Let's go through my stats, which is honestly my favorite part of these videos. This is what I missed the most. So I read 12 books total, 8 in September and 4 in October. I had 5 mystery thrillers, 1 romance, 2 general fiction, and 4 fantasy. My average star rating was a 3.7. And in those 2 months, I only read 1 of my 24 books to read in 2024, which at this point I've basically given up on the list, but so far I've gotten through 14 of them. I also had 1 5-star and 1 that was really close. So let's go ahead and start with the first book that I read in September, which was The Last Word by Taylor Adams. This is an adult mystery thriller that was really popular for a little bit. I think it was Destiny that got me to really want to read this. I feel like as a reader, the premise is just really fun because it's about this girl who is house sitting kind of in the middle of nowhere. It's just her and her dog and then her next door neighbor, which is like a half a mile away or something. And to pass her time, she's just reading a bunch of books, and she reads this one that is so awful. She leaves it a scathing 1-star review online, and then the author literally starts coming after her and trying to kill her, which I felt like was a very unique and fun plot. I really enjoyed it. This was so fast paced. I think the whole thing probably takes place over the course of like 2 or 3 days, and it's so quick and so much is happening. This is one of those thrillers that's kind of outrageous. Like the plot is just a little unbelievable and ridiculous if you really think about it, but in the moment I was eating it up and I was so hooked. I had to know.
Someone is at front door.
That is so creepy when she does that. I don't have a front door. I don't have a Ring camera. I don't like that. Anyways, I was so invested. I had to know what was going to happen. This was definitely a page turner. It's one of those books where when I finished it, I had to come out and tell my roommate every single aspect of it. And as I was saying it out loud, I was like, wow, this is really ridiculous. And she was like, this doesn't really sound like a good book. But I promise it actually was. I feel like if you can just suspend your disbelief and just go into it wanting kind of an intense, fast-paced story, then I think you would really enjoy this. And I gave it 4 stars, which is what I usually give a very solid, good thriller. Then I read Summer Romance by Annabelle Monaghan, and this was kind of like my last goodbye to summer. As far as I know, all of her books are categorized as general fiction, but they all have a very strong plot of romance. I'm pretty sure she said that she loves to always throw in a mortgage, divorce, kids, just to kind of spice things up a little bit, and this does have all 3. This one's about Allie, who has 2 kids, I think, and she's a professional organizer, but really her whole life is a mess. Her mom passed away 2 years ago, and then she got divorced 1 year ago, and she's just kind of going through the trenches. She's not really taking care of herself, just not doing very well. And we are watching her kind of put her life back together at the same time that she's meeting this guy and starting a new romance. This is my second Annabelle Monaghan book, and I really like her writing. I feel like our main characters just have so much depth and so much more going on in their lives, and then you add on a cute, sweet romance, and like, what more do you want? For some reason, I feel like I didn't connect with this one a ton. I think I liked Nora Goes Off Script by her a little bit better, but I still really enjoyed this. I highly recommend her books. They're very fast-paced, they're very easy, and if you're looking for something a little different than your typical rom-com that has a little bit more like adult life type stuff going on, then I think you would really enjoy these. I also gave this one a 4-star. Then I read one of my favorite books of the whole year, which is Anxious People by Frederick Bachman. Literally only read 1 book by this man, but he is now one of my favorite authors of all time, I feel like. I am so obsessed with the writing in this book. It was phenomenal. I don't even have the words. This is one of the best books I've read in a really long time. I loved this, and he gets so much praise. Like, I knew going into it that he has really great writing, so I was expecting a lot. And I feel like in that situation, it's really hard for me to be blown away because I have such high hopes. But oh my god, I was blown away. This was the easiest 5-star I think I've ever given. I loved this so much. So if you are unaware, this basically follows someone who's trying to rob a bank, and it doesn't go successfully, so they go into this apartment building that's having an open house, and they hold all the people in there hostage. And we are basically just doing deep dives into almost everybody who is in this apartment. The bank robber, all of the people who are hostages, the police officers who are trying to resolve the hostage situation. We are just getting so many different backstories, so many point of views, and I loved every single one of them. This book is hilarious. It's also so sad and deep, and I feel like he handles heavy topics in a way that is so much easier to digest, and just, it still really hits, but it doesn't feel really overwhelming. And he just does a really good job of combining that with the funny, lighthearted aspects of it. And from what I've heard, I feel like that's very much a staple of his writing. So I am so intrigued. I definitely plan on reading his Beartown series in the winter, and I just want to read everything that this man has ever written because I loved this. I feel like a broken record every time I talk about this book. I am just gushing, so I'm gonna stop, but that is just how much I love it. And if you read 1 book from this list, this is the one. This is what you have to read. Then I read the None Shall Sleep duology back to back, which actually I think there might be a 3rd book coming out, but as of right now there's just 2. And this is a young adult mystery thriller series. It's similar to the Natural series where we have teens in the FBI, which if you know me, I love the Natural series, so this kind of had a lot to live up to. And I will just say that this is very different, I feel like, from the Natural series. It doesn't really give the same vibe, which I feel like was good because I wasn't directly comparing them the whole time. But this series was a lot of fun and I really enjoyed it. I liked the first book better, which I gave 4 stars. I just feel like I was so sucked into this one. I was really invested in the plot. I just had to know what was going to happen. Whereas book 2, I feel like part of it was just I wasn't maybe really in the mood for it. I just wasn't as obsessed with finding out what was going to happen in this one, but I still really liked it and I gave it a solid 3 stars. If you are interested in something that's kind of the same idea as the Naturals, this one I feel like is executed very differently, so it doesn't feel too similar. We only have 2 main characters in this one, Emma and Belle, and they don't have any sort of gifts like the kids in the Naturals do. They more so just have a past and a backstory that kind of helps them in these situations. They were fun and I feel like the writing was pretty easy to breeze through, and I'm really glad that I just read them back to back. And if there is going to be a third one, then I'm definitely going to read it at some point once it comes out. Then I read the very famous Cruel Prince trilogy by Holly Black, and I'm not going to get too much into these because I did an entire 24-hour readathon dedicated to just finishing this series. So I feel like I've given my thoughts very in depth, so I'm just going to be very surface level. I gave all of these 3 stars and I was definitely a little bit underwhelmed by them. I don't know if it was the plot or the writing, but something just wasn't necessarily my cup of tea with these books. I just never really cared about what was going on. I was the most intrigued with the first one. There were some moments where I was shocked and I was like, oh my god, this is fun, what's gonna happen next? But I feel like for the most part, I really didn't care. Whenever we had plot twists and things, I was like, okay, next page, which was definitely disappointing, but I do feel like part of the reason why I didn't love this is because I forced myself to read it in 24 hours. So I guess we'll never know how I would have felt if I read them just over a normal course of time. But as it stands, these were unfortunately not a favorite for me. Moving on to October, I started off so strong with The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid, and I absolutely love TJR. She's one of my favorite authors. I just love her writing, and this was no different. This was a 4.5 stars for me. There's honestly not a whole lot of things I could pinpoint about this book that I didn't like. I'm just very picky with my 5 stars. I have to get the 5-star feeling. I can't describe it, and it's not always the same, but I know when I'm reading a book. Like when I read Anxious People, I was like absolutely 5-star almost from the very beginning, and I just never had the 5-star feelings with this one, but I loved this so much. So this is as close as a book can get to being a 5-star without giving me those feelings. I feel like this is one of the most read books in like the last 5 years. So probably most of you who are watching this have already read this book, but if you haven't, we're following Evelyn Hugo, who was a very famous Hollywood actress, and we're just following her entire life basically through the timeline of each of her 7 husbands. And this woman definitely had a very crazy life, and the way that the story is told is through interview style. We have this girl who is interviewing her for a magazine or a book or something. So for like 90% of it, we're just getting Evelyn's story, and then for the other 10%, it's more like the interviewer and Evelyn's interactions in the present and the interviewer's life. And I actually really love when books are done that way because you have 2 stories going on at the same time and you know they're kind of intertwined somehow, but you don't know until the end how. I just love a book like that. TJR just never misses. She strikes again and again. And I think that now I've read all of her interconnected books. I don't know what they're called, but they all have briefly overlapping characters, and I have loved every single one of them so far. So now I need to figure out which of her books to read next because I eventually need to read all of her backlist. Then I got back to cranking out my fall TBR books, and I went to The Maid by Nita Prose. This is a cozy mystery that's about this maid who finds a dead body in one of the hotel rooms, and she's definitely very socially awkward. People don't always understand her, and the police are very suspicious that she's the murderer. So we are following her as she is trying to investigate the murder on her own so that she can kind of clear her name. Because it's a cozy mystery, it's definitely more lighthearted. There's no intense moments going on really, and even though it's really short, I feel like this book just didn't always hold my attention. There were parts of it that I really liked, but then other parts I just felt like it kind of dragged on. I think that I more so just prefer a mystery that's a little bit faster paced. I had this on my shelves for a while and I kind of had high hopes for it, so it was a little bit of a letdown that I wasn't obsessed with it, but it was still a fun read and I gave it a 3-star. It's not a book that I would go out of my way to recommend to somebody, but if you've been eyeing it or you have it on your TBR, I feel like if you're okay with a little bit of a slower paced murder mystery, then I think you would enjoy it. Then I read One for My Enemy by Olivia Blake, and oh my gosh, this book took me like 3 weeks to read, which is why I've only read 4 books in October. And it's kind of a weird one for me because it's not like it took me that long because I wasn't enjoying it. I just feel like I wasn't reading a whole lot. I was only reading maybe like when I got in bed and I'd read like 2 pages before I fell asleep. And I feel like the longer I take to read a book, the less I'm usually gonna enjoy it. So when that sort of thing happens, I feel like it's really hard to rate the book. So I was kind of stuck with this one, but I did end up giving it 4 stars. I feel like if I was gonna rate just my actual pure enjoyment of it, it'd probably be more like a 3.5. But the days where I was actually reading bigger chunks, I was really enjoying it, and I feel like it's very well written. So I settled on a 4. This one is an adult fantasy, and it's a Romeo and Juliet retelling about two rival witch families in New York City, which literally every time I've talked about this book, I'm like, wow, I love the premise. I feel like it's so unique, so intriguing. I feel like I'm not really a big Romeo and Juliet fan, but the whole rival witch families in modern day New York City really sold me on this one. Like I said, the writing in this one was really good. I feel like Olive Blake is known for having very beautiful lyrical writing, but I was just kind of having a hard time staying invested because I was taking so long to read it, which I feel like is just so not fair to the book. But even with that, I still really enjoyed it. And to be honest, I was definitely intimidated to start a book by Olive Blake just because I've heard her writing is so good. I don't know why I'm like that, but I was definitely putting this off for quite a while. And I feel like now that I've read this one, I'm not intimidated to read the rest of her books. I don't really feel like she has the potential to become like one of my favorite writers ever, but I think that I would really enjoy all of her books that I picked up as long as I am interested in the premise. But I do kind of fear that I started with the one that I'm most interested in. Like, this one is the plot that I really was pulled into. So maybe I started with the one that I'm gonna like the most. I don't know. But this is another one that I definitely recommend. I barely finished this last book in October. I think I finished it Halloween night, but I was determined to finish it, and that is That's Not My Name by Megan Lally. My friend Mick got this for me, and I had never heard of it before, but recently I've been seeing a ton of people rave about it, so I was really excited to pick it up. Everyone says that this is a page turner, super fast paced, and I definitely agree. It's a young adult mystery thriller, and it's about this girl who wakes up in the middle of a ditch. She has absolutely no idea who she is, anything about her life. She doesn't know how she got there. She gets picked up by police, and this man shows up and he's like, "Oh my god, Megan, you're my daughter. I've been looking for you," blah blah blah. And then she ends up getting released into his custody, and she's like, "Well, I guess this is my father. I have no memories of him, but he's got these pictures of me with him. It's gotta be him." But there's some things that seem a little off. Wait, I said that her name was Megan, but I was wrong. The author's name is Megan. Her name is actually Mary. But anyways, we are getting a different point of view at the same time, which is Drew. And his girlfriend Lola disappeared, and everyone, including the police, think that he killed her. So right from the jump, we are set up to be like, okay, are Mary and Lola the same person? Who's lying? What's going on here? And I loved this. I feel like I don't always love young adult mystery thrillers. Sometimes I feel like they're just a little bit too unbelievable, far-fetched. And there definitely were a couple of aspects in this one where I was like, okay, the police wouldn't act like that, or this isn't really what would happen. But it wasn't too much, and it didn't take me out of the story at all. It was very fast-paced, and from the beginning I was super intrigued. But I feel like once we got around the halfway point, I was so sucked in. I could not put this book down. I had to figure out what was what. It's another mystery thriller that I feel like didn't do anything super special to push it over that 4-star, but it's definitely a very solid 4-star. Even if I didn't read a whole lot in October, I feel like I had a really solid 2 months. I would say the only books here that I didn't really enjoy was the Folk of the Air trilogy, but everything else was pretty solid. And I came away with 1 5-star and a couple of new favorites. So very happy with what I read here. I have got to know if everyone is as obsessed with Frederick Bachman as I fear I'm going to be, because I need more people to talk to about it. And other than Beartown, which I definitely plan on reading soon, where else do I start? Because I feel like he has so many more books than I realize. And I've heard amazing things about all of them. But anyways, that is it for my wrap up. I would love to know if you guys have read any of the books that I talked about and what your thoughts were on them. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed, and I'll catch you next time. Bye!